suspense. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going?
We are going to another episode of HardFoul Radio. This is the show that values time and puts God first. So let's get started. It's WildCard weekend, one of the best times of the year. Let's go. So, hypotheticals are normally a lane. Anyone can thought hypotheticals, right? We're all like, oh, this hypothetical, what if this happened? We all love to do that as fans, as media members. It's a really easy thing to do, right? Bengal fans have been telling me all weekend, Denver lost, the Chargers lost, put the Bengals in. If the Bengals in those same hypothetical situations, they would not have performed the same way. And I'm not here to talk about the Chargers or Bengals or even the Broncos yet. But the reality is, with hypotheticals, the one way we normally give them, we don't like people to say hypothetically when they're trying to swing up at someone. If you're not in that person's weight class, you didn't make the playoffs, you weren't as successful, we don't normally respect those kind of hypotheticals. We always respect the hypothetical swinging down, though. We always will go, if Muhammad Ali fought so-and-so, and if we know there's clearly a gap in skill, even though it's a hypothetical situation, we go with Muhammad Ali. When it comes to great hypothetically being pared down, we all universally just go, oh yeah, of course. And so I wonder, with that knowledge, I then wonder, why don't we do that with great quarterbacks? We always with great quarterbacks hold the playoffs in this super high regard where it's either incredibly invalidating of the regular season or it makes their entire career. And yes, your playoff performance matters. But it doesn't take away from how great you were in the regular season, except in the NFL when grading quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens dominated the Steelers this weekend, right? And a lot of people that have been vocal Lamar critics because he doesn't do as well in the playoffs or his numbers look like this, you're all punishing him for this hypothetical that he can never achieve, which is go look at Josh Allen's best playoff games. They're normally in the WildCard round because he's playing lesser competition, teams that he should beat. Go look at his WildCard round record. Then go look at his divisional and his AFC Conference Championship record when he's playing teams that are equal in status other powerhouse players. Well, why does that matter? Lamar has had the bye twice. Josh Allen has never had a bye week in the playoffs. Joe Burrow has never had a bye week. Oh, well, that's not fair because if they were the two seed, and it used to be that the NFL gave the top two seeds, and if this was the old format, he would have had a bye. Lamar's playing under those same rules. He has been a one seed twice. He got the bye both times, playing in the same era by the same rules. And if Lamar, we just saw again against in the wild card round against a lesser team, look how he played. He was great. The Ravens rolled. Go back even to last year when it was in the division round against the Texans, a team that was lesser, though, we all definitively agree, lesser than last year's Ravens. He was better, and he dominated. His struggles, historically, are going to come up against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, which, guess what? Everybody's historical record throughout the history of forever is bad against the current dynasty of that historical period. Fun fact, the reason why they're a dynasty is because they win more games and they win more playoff games than anybody. So everybody's record against them is going to not be that great. Everybody's record against them is not going to be that wonderful. That's just how it goes. Peyton Manning used to have this used against him all the time. And I think historically, because Peyton ended up winning 2 Super Bowls, he's been forgiven for a lot of the early mistakes. But Peyton was so dominant in the regular season, he never got the chance to play the bottom 6-5 seeds. He was always playing in the divisional round because he was just starting in the divisional round. So it's almost like we're punishing him. Josh Allen can stack up these playoff wins. Joe Burrow can stack up these playoff wins because they're not great enough in the regular season. And Lamar's in the regular season. He's so great he gets a bye. Peyton Manning was so great that he kept getting buys. We're going to punish him? If your best stats are because you were clearly a playoff team, but you weren't great enough in the regular season to secure that bye, and those become your best playoff games as the wild card round, why don't we ever bring that up as a conversation? What if we added, what if we just treated that as a win, right? Like if you went in, and I know this sounds nuts because you can't really do it, but what if instead of just counting total playoff wins, we said total playoff wins plus however many buys you had? I did it with Peyton Manning. 21 would be Peyton Manning's combined playoff wins and his first round buys due to how great he was in the regular season. That would put him third all time. Now, no one's going to think of Peyton Manning as the third best postseason quarterback of all time. Yes, he's won the 2 Super Bowls, and because of the way he played, he was so innovative as far as adjusting stuff at the line of scrimmage. We all acknowledge Peyton is one of the best to ever do it. But the reality is, Peyton, if we took into consideration, because he was so dominant during the regular season, because he was so great during the regular season, that he should be higher on a lot of lists, and he should have almost be given, we can't take that away from him. Again, we always hypothetically, we love shooting up. We love shooting up. And we almost always acknowledge the hypothetical shooting down. What if this all-time player played against this not all-time player? We give it to the all-time player. Even though it's completely imaginary, it's completely hypothetical, it can never happen. And so if you tell me Lamar Jackson, a player who is going to be a 3-time NFL MVP by the time this season is over, what would his stats look like if he got to play in the divisional round, or the wild card round, as much as Josh Allen's best games in the playoffs, as much as some of Joe Burrow's best games in the playoffs? Again, we can't punish guys because on the other side of a hypothetical that we've given everybody throughout history. I just think it's insane to me. Lamar's fantastic. I'm not saying Lamar's never had a bad playoff game, but if we do what is normal, which is the first ever playoff game he got against the Chargers, fine. He wasn't great. We could throw out a lot of guys' first ever playoff games. A lot of guys' first ever playoff games aren't great. Then you go the Titan game when they were the 1 seed. Okay, that was bad. He came back the following year and beat essentially that same Titans team. He has beaten the Steelers now. He has beaten the Texans. He is, besides Kansas City, which fine. Kansas City, current dynasty. Everyone's got a bad record in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes. That's why they're the dynasty. But let's not devalue how great he's been. We did this with Peyton forever, and it's usually happening with Lamar forever, which, by the way, fun comp, and no one will ever do it, and there's racial components, and there's stylistically. But if you want to go accomplishments and their status in the league, Lamar and Peyton have a really similar career. Again, stylistically, of course not, because they look different. No one's going to compare them. But where they end up in the league, these clearly dominant players, multiple time MVPs, and guys who, because they were so great in the regular season, they kept getting buys, and so their playoff games inherently were always harder than some of these guys who put up great performances in the wild card round. Again, Josh Allen played fantastic yesterday. Kicked the Broncos' ass. Great game by Buffalo. Denver was a 7 seed, which means they would not have been a playoff team prior to this new format. And that's the reality. Speaking of how a lot of teams played out, so Buffalo did, a lot of the dominant teams looked dominant, and you saw the clear separation in the NFL. And we said this all year, and even when I did my power rankings, and you see other people do power rankings, normally your top 4 to 5 teams are clearly just different than everybody. And that showed yesterday. Philly dominated Green Bay, even though I think there is some issues with Jalen Hurts, and I don't have him as high on a pedestal as I did just a year and a half ago. But that team, that offensive line, that defense, those receivers, even though A.J. Brown's reading books on the sideline, clearly one of the best teams, dominated the Packers when the Packers had guys dropping left and right. Go over to the AFC. Again, Baltimore dominated Pittsburgh. They should have. They're clearly the better team. The Bills dominated the Broncos. They should have. Clearly the better team. Yes, we said there was a chance. Denver was a live dog, but mano a mano, the Bills are better. It is what it is. And the 2-1 seeds, so the Lions and the Chiefs, I think are going to be in also a really similar position because I think they got even more favorable matchups because everybody else handled business. The Lions are going to get the Commanders. The Chiefs are getting the Texans. I think both teams roll. I think both teams dominate, which is why, again, we always talk about how great a team is or how great the great teams really are, and it's starting to show. And it's not just because of, everybody's talking. I heard a lot of people go like, oh, it's because of the running backs, and running backs are back, and look at the guys who are leading the league in rushing and what they're doing versus, oh, look at the guys who are leading the league in receiving, they're not in the playoffs. No. The reality is, and this is something you can never fake in any sport, and it's why we truly love sports at its core. There is a superhuman, Superman style that when a guy is just more gifted, more athletic, just you can tell there's a difference between, we all, the old expression, we all put our pants on the same way. Well, some of these guys put their pants on the same way, but they got an S on the chest. When you see Derrick Henry break that run and you go, we know the Steelers defense is good, Derrick Henry's different. When you see the Bills dominate the Broncos, you know the Broncos defense is good, the Bills were different. There's just a level to greatness that we have always admired and always revered and always talked on to come to sports. And no, it's not fair because sports are never meant to be fair. The reality is when great teams, great players, they just get to prove they're great. And in the playoffs, you get to see it. This is why power rankings, and I know I do 1 through 10, power rankings really don't matter after the first 5. We know Chiefs, Lions, Bills, Ravens, Eagles, those are the best teams in football. Those are the teams that legitimately have a chance to be in the Super Bowl. And if everything plays out, those will be a part of our Final Four. The only team that's going to have to lose and not make it is the one game where 2 of those teams are playing each other, the Ravens and the Bills. Otherwise, this is why we love sports. We love watching greatness. We love watching people, that very gladiator-esque feel of guys who are just so clearly more gifted at something. People say it's chalk. Sometimes people say that's boring. But the reality is, and I think the Chiefs are going to dominate the Texans, and they haven't been a very dominant team all year. I think the Lions are going to dominate the Commanders, even with all their injuries. I think the Eagles win their game. And then obviously the Ravens and Bills, one of them is going to have to knock each other out, and that's fine. That's why we love these Final Fours. That's why we love these last remaining teams. Because they're going to do the same thing. All these teams are going to do the same thing the week after. They're going to be knocking each other out. Because the best of the best, and that's why we watch sports. Man, there's a lot to talk about. We're spending the first hour primarily talking about winners as a recap from the weekend. We'll get into some of the losers in the second hour. Obviously, still, it is a Monday, so HardRight, HardLeft. Tony's going to stop by here on the other side of the break as well. A lot to talk about. Appreciate you guys stopping in. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily. This is definitely a case of expectations. There is no expectations. Drake Mace, we can go out there, he can throw the ball around. Even though he's throwing game-ending interceptions, it doesn't matter. Caleb Williams, who has played some of the best, worst football ever, like, he's not throwing interceptions, and so his passer rating still looks good. Some of the things that he's doing, but he's also not throwing touchdowns. He wasn't really giving the explosive plays. I understand the coaching in Chicago has been a shit show all year. They obviously they've been firing more and more people. They did retain Thomas Brown, though, to be the head coach, so we'll see where this goes. This is definitely a case of expectations. And with that, we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today. So, and this is going to sound probably wild because I root for one of these teams, but I think it's pretty clear we don't need a 7 seed, man. I know the story last year was really cool with the Packers beating the Cowboys, and that's realistically all we can hope for is the upset stories. And I know last week I talked about the upset stories, and I loved them, but the reality is not enough teams are going to win as a 7 seed versus a 1 seed for this, I think, to matter enough for us to keep the format the way it is. Yeah, I would love, had Denver won yesterday and the story that would have came out of that. And yeah, I would have loved if, the 7 seed in the NFC again, which was the Packers, if they had beaten the Eagles. But, excuse me, the reality is 7 seeds aren't going to win any kind of consistently against the 2 seeds. The 2 seeds are clearly better. The 2 seeds are clearly the more dominant team. And the games yesterday reflected that. And we gave all this, a lot of people, I'm not as into college football as everybody else, and I am trying, get to that later in the year, is everybody gave shit to the college football playoffs because they expanded and the games are all blowouts. Now, college football naturally has a lot more blowouts than the NFL. That's just the way it's always worked. But no one wanted to go there and criticize the NFL and say, hey, because we're all a bunch of football junkies and we love this sport way too much at an unreasonable level. No one wanted to say, oh, these teams shouldn't be in the playoffs. Except Bengal fans. I'm not talking to Bengals fans. Y'all were just doing the most and I don't care. And there is something to what's a more exciting story? Is the more exciting story that the Broncos made to the playoffs for the first time since Super Bowl 50? To a fan of an individual franchise, as someone who is a Broncos fan, yes, that is more exciting. But to a fan of the league, is it more exciting that Thursday night game between the Broncos and Chargers realistically should have been for the final playoff spot? And then the Broncos are in the position of where Cincinnati was, which is, can you get that final playoff spot with 3 weeks to go, needing some help from the Chargers? Now, in this scenario, the Broncos will make the playoffs, and that's fine. And I would have understood, as a fan, yes, I would have been upset, but that's the game you got to win. If you want to prove you're really a playoff team, that's the game you got to win. This is why I didn't give the Bengals fans that much attention or that much limelight or that much really I didn't partake in what they were saying, because had this been the old format, you would have been really far removed from making the playoffs. You would have only been in the conversation, but you're only in the conversation because there was 7 teams allowed. And so even coming down the last couple of weeks, the Ravens, the Chargers, the Broncos, the Ravens are the 1-game lead over the 2 of them, fighting for that last playoff spot. The Bronco-Charger game on Amazon Prime, Thursday Night Football, would have basically been for the final seed, because the next 2 games, I know Denver ended up losing the Bengals and played the Chiefs. Those potentially could have both been who-care games, because the Chargers would have a lead, and they would have been playing the Raiders and the Patriots, 2 games that they did end up winning, and would have probably also still won in a 6-format team. And then the Packers, excuse me, if we believe in standards, what's the standard for the Packers now? Just get into the playoffs and Jordan Love maybe does something? Because the one moment we've gotten is everybody got to laugh at the Cowboys. Because the Cowboys, we all view it as just blew it last year. One of their best years ever. Dak was a potential MVP candidate, and they got smacked around by the Packers. And that's all we got. Otherwise, 7 seeds haven't won a game besides that. So do we really need a 7 seed in the playoffs? And it lowers the bar where if you're just pretty good, like in the NFL, there's great, there's really good, there's bad, and there's really bad. All the good teams are alive for the playoffs. Look at how many teams were alive throughout the entirety of the season. The Colts were alive, and they were just barely good. The Dolphins were alive up until the last week of the season. They were just barely good. I understand they had the injuries, but still, the injuries specifically to Tua. The Broncos, who were just above good, and they got into the playoffs. The Chargers, who were just above good, they got into the playoffs. The Packers, who were just above good, they got into the playoffs. Like, these teams, I almost think the storyline would be better is if instead of the team breaking some kind of postseason streak or getting back into the postseason as a 7 seed, why not make the story, oh, it's the team that just almost missed out, and man, imagine what could have been. We love imagination in sports. We just talked about this, we love hypotheticals in sports. We love what ifs. And as the story of a full regular season coming down to that last couple of weeks, is that not more exciting? Is that not more entertaining? Is that not more of a story than the Broncos getting this 7th seed and lose by almost 30 to the Bills? The Packers get in as a 7th seed and get dominated by the Eagles? Like, what if the Packers and Broncos were the teams to look out for next year because they just almost made the playoffs? That, to me, would be the more exciting story. We don't need, and again, I love that the fact that Denver was in the playoffs. Obviously, it gave me more football to watch. But the reality is, we don't need the 7th seed, man. It's not that necessary.
And with that, we're joined by my brother Tony, my co-host in the group chat podcast, coming in at 6 foot, 230 pounds. He is here for another wonderful Monday. How you doing, man?
So I lost 5 pounds. I'm 225. But the
Oh,
6 foot, is official. You could check the stats. It's official 6 foot.
Official. Hey, man, they said, hey, let the record show it. Trump and Derrick Henry are the same size and build.
Crazy, right? Crazy.
One looks a little different when they run.
A little bit.
So we're obviously going to talk to the Ravens, but I want to run this by you. So I started the show off today. I like stories in sports. And I feel like sometimes because of the way the internet moves, we lose some of these stories. So I'm a big Peyton Manning fan, mainly because he came to play with Denver and, lifelong Bronco. I think Lamar gets criticized, and there's a racial factor, obviously. No one's ever going to compare Lamar to Peyton because stylistically and black guy, white guy, and stuff like that. But I think there's a part of Lamar, something that Lamar is punished for, I think is totally unfair, is that Lamar's had the bye multiple times. Josh Allen has never had a bye week. Joe Burrow has never had a bye week. So the games, when you start looking at playoff stats, like, well, Josh has these many playoff touchdowns versus Lamar's got these in his stats. Lamar he's never had a chance to play some of these teams that Burrow's gotten to play in the divisional round, and then that Josh Allen has gotten to play. Josh Allen's best games are when he played Pittsburgh a few years ago. The game yesterday he played against Denver. Lamar, for the second time, got to actually play in that first playoff game, and I believe this is his first one since he played the Chargers back in his very first playoff experience, which we don't hold a lot of guys' first playoff game against them in terms of a career. Peyton Manning, I think, got punished for this too. Peyton Manning had so many 1 and 2 seeds because he was so dominant in the regular season. You don't get to play the 6 seed or the 5 seed or now the 7 seed, and you get to almost like fluff up your playoff stats. You're going straight into the divisional round, and you're playing a team that's already won a playoff game. You're playing a team that's already one of the higher seeds. What do you think?
You're the first person in any media I'm not going to say any media, but any non-Ravens media to point that out. And it's like we've said that for years because it's just like I don't know what you want from the motherfucker. Like you do the work to not have to play 3 games to make it to the Super Bowl. You do the work to have to play 2 games to make it to the Super Bowl. Not yesterday, but Saturday, that was his 3rd wild card game. He played the Chargers rookie year, then he played the Titans in that rematch in 2020. After obviously the upset in 2019, and then Saturday night in Pittsburgh. He is 2-1 in those games. He has an opportunity, and I want to get in front of this now. Just no, it could go either way, but he has an opportunity to beat every team that's ever beat him in the playoffs during this run. Um, he
Yeah.
beat Tennessee the year after they beat him in 2019. He plays Buffalo on well he wouldn't play the Chargers in the playoffs, but most teams, of course, um most teams that beat him in the playoffs, it's since at least since he became like, full
Just
starter
MVP
MVP
level.
Lamar. Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So but yeah, he gets I don't want to say shitting on him, but like he gets shit for winning. He gets for doing what you're supposed to do in the regular season, and that's winning a lot of games and putting your team in position to where you can have the buys and you can have the two games. And when we look at playoff stats, if you look at his last three playoff games, he's 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 60% completion, and about 800 from scrimmage. And it's like I don't really the narrative of like he can't win. Okay, he's currently as it stands 3-4 in the playoffs. He's played in three playoff games since January of 2021. Playoff games, he's 2-1. So it's like it's just we talk a lot of shit because he moves the needle. Obviously, like they say the
Mhm.
things they say about him because he's a needle mover. But he's like Jason Tatum in that sense where you get penalized for winning. And just because you don't win the big one, your accomplishments all of a sudden just don't matter as much. And that's not how this works.
No, I agree 1,000%. Again, it's we talked a little about Peyton on group chat or a little off mic before then. It was like Peyton historically is going to age better because again, when the majority, I think half of Peyton's losses at a time, and so that will eventually, it's similar to I don't think in 10 years rational people are going to hold Mahomes losses against him. It's like, damn, you lost to Mahomes. It's like welcome to the club. Everybody during Mahomes' peak ended up losing to him. Just part of how the NFL went for those handful of years. Um, I also want to ask to the Ravens now, as a fan, what is your expectation and or nervous level going into Buffalo? And I don't want to say this, so I've been on Lamar's MVP, but do you think there's going to be some MVP swing in this game, even though there's technically not supposed to be when Lamar and Josh play off against each other?
hmm To answer the first part, I would say I'm not as nervous as the Pittsburgh game just because it's Pittsburgh. And it's the first playoff game. Um, I am I have a high respect for Josh Allen, like and what he's able to do. So it's like I don't want to say like I'm not worried at all. I do think there's some advantages that the Ravens can. I do think there's some disadvantages that Buffalo has that the Ravens can take advantage of. On the opposite side of that, Buffalo will. I don't really take much from the Week 4 game, personally, just because I think that these are two different teams as we see them. Buffalo is going to be more healthier going into this matchup. More healthier. They'll be healthier going into this matchup. Um, Matt Milano's back. I got a high respect for Matt Milano. Taron Johnson's going to play. He didn't play in Terrell. Terrell Bernard is going to play, and he didn't play. So I think that'll make a difference. I don't expect, like I text you, I don't expect like this 200-yard rushing game from Derrick Henry again. But I do
Mhm.
think that the Ravens have an advantage in their heavier sets. I think Buffalo's a little bit light when you talk about the corners and the secondary and even some of the line and even the linebacking core is not like the biggest there. So I think that Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews can have big days. And Mark Andrews is healthy compared to that Week 4 game, which he wasn't. He was coming off a car accident, probably like 5, 6 weeks from that point, still recovering from the leg injury. But he's back in a way that he wasn't then. Of course, Isaiah Likely's just been playing really good, steady ball next to him, and I think those guys can really have a big day. Um, I I think the Ravens will win. I could be wrong. I think they'll win. I think that I just don't think Buffalo has the defensive physicality if that's the right word, to hold up. When you talk about the run game, and I still think Derrick Henry's going to have an effective day, and I don't think they can play to commit to stopping that because I don't think they can hold up against the tight ends. Ravens can go 2 tight end sets, they can go 3 tight end sets. I just don't think that's good for Buffalo. And I think that obviously keeping the ball out of Josh Allen's hands is key. You want to play that game. And I think that the Ravens have the personnel to do so.
Okay. I want to ask, as far as from a fan perspective, as for all the players you've seen, and due to the team that you root for, you've seen multiple Hall of Famers. You've seen, for the Ravens specifically, you've seen arguably the greatest linebacker of all time, the greatest safety of all time. You've seen truly great transcendent players. So there's a clip going around, and it's insane. It's off the Derrick Henry big run, and watching it in real time, it's just like, wow, Pittsburgh missed an assignment, and Derrick Henry got behind everybody really quick, and boom, it was off to the races. And then everybody saw the still shot, which is 2 linebackers with a play that was a play action, or could have been a play action theoretically, where Derrick Henry, a Hall of Fame running back, is involved. 2 guys went to Lamar. How high is he on your list of just truly great players you watched any sport that for your team specifically? Again, you've seen Ray Lewis, you've seen Ed Reed, you've seen Pierce, KG, a bunch of guys in all these sports. If you want to go to baseball, Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz, but that kind of gravity for a player is not normal under any circumstance. So where would Lamar rank for you personally as a fan?
He's pretty high. He's pretty high. He's probably in the Mookie Betts tier of I really don't understand what I'm watching until you kind of have time to digest how good it is. Mookie Betts is now a 3-time World Series champion. He's one of the best players of his era, but he's I really Mookie Betts was an incredible Red Sox. He was MVP, and Lamar, he was dynamic. He was a small play. He's a small player that can still hit 30 home runs, and he can still steal 30 home runs and play every position on the baseball field. And when we talk about Lamar, you're talking about a quarterback who has thrown for 4,000 yards, who has rushed for 900 yards. The only reason he didn't rush for 1,000 yards is because he went 2 or 3 weeks where he really didn't run the ball. He would have had 1,000 otherwise because he's essentially 50 rushing yards a game. He led the league in yards per pass attempt. He led the league in yards per rush.
That's an insane stat.
He's the best runner on a team with Derrick Henry. He's the best passer. He's very high up. He's only going to get better. He's what I would assume on his way to a 3rd MVP in his 7 seasons. Back-to-back MVPs, the first since Rodgers in 20 and 21. He's incredible, man. He's high up there. I don't really have a number on it because Ed was incredible and Ray was incredible and Poppy was incredible when he was hitting 40 and 45 and shit like that. So it's I don't know where I can rank him. Because he plays on the team with a guy who's the greatest kicker of all time. And it's not I'm not saying obviously Tuck's a kicker, so it's not. I'm not saying he's a better player, but I'm talking about just greatness at the position. Justin Tucker is the original 50 is nothing to me guy. He's 55 is nothing to me. He's birthed so many people. He's the first to do so. So but yeah, he's incredible, man. He really is incredible, and I'll never forget his first MVP season and just kind of watching it all play out. You never really seen nothing like it. He led the league in passing touchdowns that year, and he ran for 1,000 yards. It's this not normal.
It's not. It's on that list of when you watch him, and he's clearly. We finally have the answer. It was Mike Vick was always the prototype, right? It was wow. And Mike Vick was not a great thrower of the football when he first got to Atlanta, but he was so electric and it was so dynamic of a player. It's you can't take your eyes off him. and any play could be a crazy play. But there was always the question of like, man, what if this ever really manifests into the guy who was like actually great at both? And Lamar, similarly at the start of his career, like that year one, and you could, I don't really make the argument, but I understand the people that say even his first MVP year, he wasn't the pass that he is now. Seeing it all come together, it's like, yeah, on any given day, what do you do with him? Like any kind of defense you potentially throw at him, he's just so gifted and talented and great that it just might not work. Even if it's take whatever DC or whatever players you want to put out there, like he can just make all that shit look stupid. I want to go over to basketball really quick. So the Thunder and Cavs just played. I know your opinion on the Cavs. You've been diamond testing the Cavs all year. The Thunder, though, the Thunder and Celtics also played within the last week.
Yeah.
Have the Thunder moved up? Obviously, the Celtics are going to be your favorite coming out of the East. Have the Thunder moved up in your how serious you take them as a potential title contender or as a team that the Celtics could run into in the finals? Like, how serious have they moved up on your list of like, hey, this is a team I actually have to worry about now?
They were my final pick before the year. I don't know if we talked about that stuff because it was like kind of came pretty quick, but they were my finals pick before the year because I didn't think that I think they had the best roster in the West. I think they're the best team. Shea was my MVP because I thought they finished with the one. Even if they didn't make it to the finals when it's all said and done, Shea was my MVP because I thought they just have the best regular season record in the West. They haven't had Chat for a few months now. Caruso hasn't played the last few weeks, and they're just a talented team. Like they're super talented. They're really good. They're led by the presumed MVP at the moment, and they're tough to beat, specifically in OKC. Now, watching them play the Celtics, they're not a team that I think that the Celtics in a 7-game series would struggle a lot against. That's not to say the Celtics would sweep them or anything, but the Celtics was up about 13 at one point in that first half. And, Thunder is at home. Refs was officiating, as they do for the home team, specifically the 1 seed, so I get it. Guys made shots that may not normally make. Lou Dort made a lot of shots that he may not make on the road, so stuff like that is where it's like, okay, you can eat that. But they are exactly what I thought they'd be. Playing really good. The defense is tight. And they can score. A lot of times when you have teams like that, they may be great defensively, or they may have a guy that can get a lot of buckets, but they may not be able to really run in that way. But they can score points. They got multiple guys that can give you 25 to 30, and that's a winning recipe, specifically in the West where a lot of teams are up and down. Denver's coming on strong as of late since they put Russ in the starting lineup. Memphis is still there. Houston's hanging around, and I think that's really good for them. Interested to see if a move is made for Memphis or Houston, because I do think that they can challenge OKC. I don't know if they beat them, but I do think they can challenge them. So yeah, interested to see if a move is made by one of those teams to kind of solidify their run at the West. But yeah, OKC's really good.
I'll ask, what was your biggest before I get you out of here? What was your biggest surprise, and like both ways? Like, what team were you most impressed in the wild card round, and which team were you probably the most disappointed in the wild card round out of all the teams?
Most impressed by Houston for sure. I don't think I wrote them off like super dismissive. Did think the Chargers will win, but did think the Chargers will win just because Houston hadn't had like the energy. They kind of they look done, but can't count them out. They home cooking definitely helped for sure. That crowd was rocking. They made plays and they got the win. The defense balled out. So that's the team I was definitely most impressed by. As far as disappointed, can't really say I was disappointed by any of the teams because it went chalk on the AFC in a way a lot of people thought I would say outside of the Houston. I wouldn't even say that because I'm sure a lot of people did pick Houston. Chargers were the favorites, but I'm sure it wouldn't have surprised a lot of people that Houston won. And then over in the NFC, we'll see tonight with the Rams and the Vikings, but didn't see much surprise there. The Packers just fell apart. Like they didn't. Players were dropping all over the place. Wasn't much they could do. In a win, I'm actually kind of disappointed in the Eagles.
Okay, so I think that game was excuse me. I don't know what to make of the Eagles because I think because the Lions have sustained so many injuries on defense, I think the Eagles have the best roster currently going in the NFL. I also don't think I like their head coach, and their quarterback is just okay. And I still think they could win a Super Bowl, but I'm also not going to be surprised if they're going to be playing Washington this next week, right? Or if I guess pending.
Correct.
Pending.
No, the Commanders play the Lions because they were the 7. So they play either Minnesota or the Rams. And I could see them losing either one of those teams.
1,000%. I could see them winning by 30, or I could see them losing. And I'm like, I just don't know what to make of Philadelphia anymore. Because again, I'm not a big Nick Sirianni guy. Jalen Hurts just feels like it's, I repeat it a lot. Chris Carter said 99% of guys are system guys, and I believe it wholeheartedly, even great players. And Jalen Hurts right now just seems to be in the best system. Part of that is because you have still an amazing offensive line. You've got A.J. Brown, Devontae, you've got good. We respect both coordinators between Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, but there's just something about Philadelphia that I'm like, I just can't confidently say I feel like they should be the team that should be the favorite coming out of the NFC, especially with the Lions' injuries. But I wouldn't be shocked if they won the Super Bowl. I also wouldn't be shocked if they lost by 20 in the next round. It's so wild to me. No, man, appreciate you as always for coming on. Next week, give me a score really quick. Give us a score before you head out. Ravens Bills score.
Nah. Now we're not doing that. Not doing that.
Hey, man, we started, that shit was bad luck. We started doing that with Will. The Bears are 4-2. We was like, yo, let's start throwing out some scores. Man, they ain't hit a score for 9 weeks. Just like, okay, maybe we should stop this.
Maybe so.
I appreciate you as always, though, bro. Catch you on group chat next week.
Peace.
you want to go the God route, you want to make it DBZ, fine. I don't think that's very interesting.
No, I agree.
And I think that like you can do these crazy like I think one of the things people hoped for with Boruto, and it was when we went to go see that movie years ago, and it's when we got like the manga announced and when they announced the show and everything.
Mhm.
And the hope was that it would go back to the roots of what made Naruto popular.
Mhm.
I just think the creators didn't understand what made Naruto good. For us,
No,
there's
I
gonna be an audience of people that want ass kicking. I just don't think it's the fun. Like, I don't think that's fun. Oh,
it
wow, Boruto has hands. And I'm like, but me too, man. Like, I don't know. Like, like
And we are back. This is hour 2 of HardFoul Radio. We started hour 1 discussing a lot of the winners, and we're going to have a bunch of more breakdowns throughout the week. But we have to check in on the losers to start hour 2. And with that in mind, I think there's 2 clear different type of losers. So multiple teams lost over the weekend. Obviously, welcome to the playoffs. But there's 2 in particular, both in the AFC, that I think have very drastic. They're looking at losing drastically different. There's the first team, the Denver Broncos, who are looking at losing and going, this is okay. We overachieved, rookie quarterback, $50 million dead cap, a roster that was projected, ESPN and multiple other platforms said was the second worst roster in the NFL, a team by Vegas is only projected to win 5.5 games, and they ended up with 5 All-Pros, a rookie quarterback threw the second most touchdowns ever for a rookie quarterback in NFL history, Cortland Sutton's resurgence, a defense that had moments of dominance and was very good throughout, and again, this all while carrying the highest dead cap in NFL history. So even though the game was disappointing because Denver even got off to a really fast start, the Troy Franklin touchdown, and it felt like maybe there's a chance, maybe we are going to be the team to upset, and then Buffalo scored 31 and answered and all went away. But Denver, again, is looking at this as we were ahead of schedule. As long in terms of, whoops, don't knock your mic over, guys. In terms of overall long-term franchise, of a long-term franchise point of view, this is all a win for Denver. You got your quarterback. You have locked up several key positions. This includes multiple guys on your offensive line, which was one of the best rated by PFF and just flat out one of the best in the league. You got Marvinsman Jr. more involved in your offense. On defense, you locked up Jonathan Cooper, Pat Surtain II. Nick Bonito is most likely in the near future where he's going to get an extension. Those are multiple of y'all pros. Jonathan Cooper was a 10-sack guy. Zach Allen you've got on a 4-year deal. You just got last year. You're probably going to extend him another couple of years. You've got obviously a bunch of money coming in not only because of the dead cap, but because the salary cap is going to continue to go up, and you have the richest owners in the NFL. So when it comes to paying guys up front, so that you have more flexibility in the back end, they're absolutely going to be willing to do it. And again, you have your quarterback who, say what you want, and I've said this and I've been very consistent on this stance. Bo Nix doesn't have to be Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or Drake May from a talent or athleticism perspective. Now, he's more athletic than people give him credit for, and I think he throws a better deep ball than people give him credit for. There is some mistakes there, but he's a rookie. That happens even at his age. Jaden Daniels and him also, by the way, are the same age. They're both 24. But the biggest thing, and this is always the thing that I think got ignored with the Drew Brees commentary and the Sean Payton-Drew Brees dynamic, is they both worked well for each other. They both were great as a collaborative effort, meaning it doesn't matter, like being the greatest talent or whatever doesn't really mean much if you're not compatible with your head coach or you are not compatible with your coaching staff as a whole. Let me tell you, Cam Newton is one of the most talented athletes and talented quarterbacks to ever play the game. He had Ron Rivera, who they got along. I'm sure they had a great relationship, but it was not offensive genius, offensive whiz with great young quarterback. It was defensive guy with quarterback, and stylistically, there's some clashing there. Drew Brees and Sean got along. They're both the perfect guys for each other. I don't know if Drew Brees has his career without Sean Payton, and Sean Payton doesn't have his career without Drew Brees. So if Bo Nix is the guy that Sean says, he's accurate, he works my offense, he understands things, he processes really well, which is a huge thing for Sean. If that's the guy he wants to roll with, I'm rolling with. Because Denver has now entered the category of how many NFL teams where ownership, A+, head coach, A+, general manager, A+. Look at the All-Pros Denver got. They all came from one guy, George Payton, who drafted 4 of them and aggressively went to free agency for the 5th one. So GM, head coach, ownership, all A+. Your quarterback, is Bo ever going to be an A+? Debatable. It's unlikely if we're being completely fair. But if he's Sean's guy, and I always said this about Drew Brees. Drew Brees wasn't Peyton Manning from his talent standpoint. Drew Brees wasn't Aaron Rodgers from a talent standpoint. He wasn't even Tom Brady from a physical standpoint. But he was the most accurate passer. He understood Sean's system. He could process with as good as anybody in NFL history. And that made them the perfect marriage. And so if that's who Sean believes, Bo Nix is that next level of guy. And again, Bo was a bigger athlete, a better athlete than Brees was. And what the better athlete, what most people gave him credit for, Bo is more accurate than people gave him credit for. Remember, this is the guy who was, everyone said when he got drafted, including people on this network, can't throw. He's a waste of a first-round pick. Oh my gosh, what a reach. All these things. Denver's in such a terrible position, and they just screwed the fan base over for another 5 years because they're going to be bad. And now look where they are. Young. It's the 3rd youngest roster in the NFL. 2nd youngest make the playoffs because I swear everyone on the Packers is 22. Their quarterback they've got. Their head coach they got right. Their general manager they got right. And ownership is extremely wealthy, willing to write checks. So boom, 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 boom. There's not a lot of franchises that have that. Even franchises that have success don't have all 4 of those. But the franchises that have consistent success always are getting to the playoffs, always have good teams. They have those. They have the head coach. They have the general manager. They have the quarterback. They have an owner. Like, they got it. And Denver's now in that class, which is a huge upgrade to where they've been the last 9 years. So even though, yes, that game was disappointing, you walk away from that game once you get past the initial fan emotion of it and going, man, I thought we had a chance, et cetera, et cetera. Denver feels great about where they are today. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the exact opposite. The Steelers are now, I said this to start the season, and Mike Tomlin proved me wrong, and he got to 10 wins, and there is something to say about the coach who can just drag a bad team to a good record. But like we talked about in the first hour, when it comes time to be great, when guys have to show why they're at the highest level of the sport, why they're professionals, why they're paid millions upon millions of dollars, you can't just will those guys who are lesser talented teams, who are lesser talented players, and just will them to win those games. And that's why Mike Tomlin, we all know, never been below 500. And they said, that's great. And I thought they were going to have a losing season this year, which to his credit, he did not have. But he's now back in the same position because he has yet to win a playoff game. I saw it. Dan Quinn, since Mike Tomlin's last playoff win, right? Dan Quinn, coach of the Washington Commanders, got the Falcons to a Super Bowl, fired, got the Washington job, and got Washington now to a playoff win. All within, and was Dallas's DC, and got Dallas to a playoffs, all since Mike Tomlin last won a playoff game. And while it sounds great from this long-term objective view of you're never under 500, Mike Tomlin's one of the best, and I believe he is one of the best head coaches. But I just think his time could just be up. And the second he has a losing season, that record is meaningless to ownership, the fan base, to the football world. Because the second you go under 500, now you have no playoff success to go off of. You can't say, oh, we had a losing season, but at least we won a Super Bowl, or at least we had a deep playoff run. And the reality with the Steelers is your great players are no longer great and no longer in their prime. TJ Watt is the closest you have. And we even saw TJ Watt start to slow down. Cam Hayward, I know he was a first-team All-Pro. Respectfully, I think he shouldn't. I respectfully think he should not have been. Zach Allen flat out had a better year. But Cam is over 30. TJ is entering his 30s. Minka Fitzpatrick has been passed up by multiple safeties. Like, the guys on the Steelers who were supposed to be great, they are no longer in their athletic prime or their playing prime. And then you go to quarterback. Russ, Justin Fields. The reality is neither's the long-term answer, because if either of them were, they would have stood out. Do you think if they had a talent like a Jaden Daniels on their team, they'd be worried, they'd be wondering, is it Russ or is it Justin? Do you think if they had a talent like Jordan Love, do you think they'd be wondering if it's Russ or if it's Justin? So the Steelers, yes, we've always acknowledged their ownership. Are we sure it's still great in 2024, 2025? I heard this the other day. Sorry, we acknowledge also, too, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We acknowledge Mike Tomlin as a great head coach. But is he still truly great in 2025? We acknowledge that they had these players, TJ, Fitzpatrick, these guys. Are they still great in 2025? I heard this, and I want to bounce this off. I heard last week, and it was the idea that there's truly no great franchise. Now, we associate greatness with teams that have resumes of greatness. We associate the Celtics in the NBA and the Lakers in the NBA and what the Cowboys did up until about 15 years ago, and what the Steelers have been and what the Patriots were. The reality is great players make great franchises. The Bulls were a great franchise with MJ. What have they been since? The Lakers were a great franchise, Kobe and Shaq in his prime. What are they since? They got 2 years of LeBron still being like that level of all NBA guy. And then what are they now? The Patriots, with Tom Brady, they look like the premier franchise. And that's because we give, and I do too, we give credits to good ownerships, good general managers. But the reality is those guys have to keep updating their resumes. Players got to do it. GMs got to do it. Owners got to do it. And if you're not great because you no longer have that end of Ben Roethlisberger, Troy Polamalu, that great Steeler defense, and then you no longer even have TJ Watt in his prime or Cam Hayward in his prime. Arguably, the only guy you have potential in his prime is George Pickens, and he's more interested in fighting people than catching the fucking football. Like, the Steelers need to update some stuff. It feels outdated. It feels like they're going the wrong way. So even though, again, we're starting with the losers. The Broncos lost, Steelers lost. I think these fan bases, I think these ownership groups, I think these teams feel drastically different about losing. And if you're Mike Tomlin, not a bad idea, honestly. It happens with a lot of other great coaches too, so it's not a disrespectful thing. Sometimes the message just wears out. It might be time, if you're Mike Tomlin, to go to a team like if the Bears are willing to give the Steelers a first-round pick for you. Or if, the Patriots just signed Mike Vrabel, but I would have said that would have been a good idea. Like, it might just be time to move on. Update your resume. Shit gets outdated. And that's what the Steelers are. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily.